Hey, this is Rocken Locken coming back at you again with Pleiadian Express Productions. Your host with the most from coast to coast, giving you all the toast, giving you coolness, hotness, and everything you want in us. Hey, I wanted to touch on a subject. This big taboo thing about our historical fixation with marijuana. Okay, the stuff was made illegal like in the 1920s because mainly it was a drug that came from Mexico or minorities were using it and whatnot. And the alcohol industry wasn't very fond of it being around because it provided an alternative. Okay, so fine. So, come about the 1940s, they did this movie called Reefer Madness where it showed people getting stoned, or so they thought, and it showed people like, I think it even showed a scene of this guy that tried to rape a woman after smoking some. Somebody was sitting on their couch and tried to go jump out the balcony, you know, off a, 5-story building or whatever, right? And the thing about it was, until about the 1970s, and I'll explain this in a second, until about the 1970s, the only danger with marijuana is that you might have to smoke so much of the shit you'd get a migraine and have to go to the hospital because it was very weak. Yet I had a 1963 Encyclopedia Britannica, and it labeled marijuana as a class 1 hallucinogen, and it said addicts smoke this stuff. And this was in the definition. It said addicts smoke it to hallucinate. Look, people, that don't work. Okay? If you've ever hallucinated on marijuana, you had some shit that was laced. Okay? I smoked the shit out of it as a kid. Okay? And into my teenage years. I could leave it or take it now. Maybe a couple times a year I will have a puff on it, but I really don't care for it anymore. But I loved it as a kid. Now, here's the other thing. So we fast forward through the 60s into the 70s, and growers came up with a technique to, well, let me first say this. You have the male part of the plant and the female part of the plant. Now, the female part of the plant is the one that produces THC. Okay, the male part is just basically the CBD, which is oil that we use for treatment now on our animals and even us. Okay, so what they learned to do was, as the plant was growing, they learned to separate that male before it was able to pollinate the female. Because once it pollinated the female part of the plant, you got all these seeds inside of the flowers and in the bud of the female plant. And that killed half the THC right there. So when they were able to separate those two at growth, when growers and scientists figured out how to get that right, they were able to separate that male part before it was able to germinate the female. So those pockets that became seeds typically, they became filled completely with THC, which is the active drug in marijuana that gets a person stoned. Okay, so that happened, and they called that pot Sinsemilla. It was seedless. It revolutionized the pot industry completely. This, was probably going on before that in some other countries. I heard the shit in Vietnam in the 60s was really killer. But so like on the American streets, it was about the mid to late 70s before they were able to do that, to make seedless pot called Sinsemilla. Okay, so fine. The pot got stronger and stronger and stronger, but people would tell their kids shit like, oh, there hasn't been enough research done on it. We don't know what it can do to you. Oh, it's a gateway drug. It's so much stronger than it used to be. You know what? And as far as that stronger than it used to be mentality, yeah, it is. But the thing of it is, why is that a bad thing? So, taking one or two puffs versus having to smoke a whole shitload to get off, that's a bad thing? That's a lot better for your lungs. And look, there's only so stoned on marijuana you can get. You fall asleep, whatever, get the munchies, whatever, just lay on the couch. But no, it doesn't make people freak out. And here, I'm going to dispel this fucking notion to anybody who hears this shit. This notion about it being a gateway drug, right? Okay, yeah, in my era, it was a gateway drug, and I'll tell you why. Because it was illegal, because this harmless fucking plant, and it's really hilarious, was illegal. You'd have to hook up with people, on the black market or, friends you knew to get a bag. And of course, half the time you'd get ripped off and you never knew what you were getting. But you would also be introduced because of that kind of a connection, that illegal connection. Yes, it would afford you the opportunity to run into cocaine, to run into methamphetamine, whatever the drug might have been at the time, LSD, mushrooms, right? It gave you that opportunity. Now, if the shit would have been legal the whole time and sold in a store and regulated like it is now here in Oregon, where I live, the state I live in, dude, first of all, those people that did get turned on to other drugs, we all did, but that stayed with those other drugs, right? Okay, they were either going to become addicts of something one way or the other anyway, but then another half of them would have never gone that route because they wouldn't have needed to. So that's how marijuana was a gateway drug, because it introduced you, because you had to get it illegally and on the sly. You had to get it through backdoor channels and shit through friends. And that also gave you access to all these other drugs. All right? I'm a pretty radical guy, though. I think, like Portugal does it, I think every drug should be legal. I think it should be weighed out. I think it should be clean. I think it should be sold in stores. Okay, Portugal's found that they have like 1/10 of the problem with robberies and even drug overdoses than they used to. Okay? So, and besides that, even if it was the most deadly thing on earth, right? If you're an adult and you're not trying to hurt a kid or force it on a kid, it's none of your goddamn business what these people do. But back to the marijuana subject. Okay. So now it's legal here in Oregon, and it keeps getting stronger and stronger and stronger, but that really doesn't mean anything because, there's only so stoned you can get with that plant. All right? Yes, the first time a person smokes it, sometimes, at least it was my experience, the first time you smoke it, I was 13, you get really, really, really fucked up on it, but that doesn't happen again after that. Not to that extreme, okay? Yes, you get lazy, you don't want to do anything. You can get mentally hooked on the drug, not physically, but you can get mentally hung up on the drug. I know, I've been there, people, believe me. All right, but so nowadays, it's extremely strong, but it's not just that. And I was talking to my doctor about this about 2 years ago. He used to smoke pot in college. And we were talking about it. And he's like, man, I said, look, doctor, it's not that the strength is any stronger than when I was a kid. Because I know that's true, but I don't get that same laughing, funny, high, that good time buzz off of it. And it could be just because I'm getting older. And he's like, no, that's not it. He said the chemistry of the shit has changed. With all this manufactured growing of it now by, pot farms and growers legally and shit. This stuff is just grown in different kinds of chemicals now instead of organically, and it really fucks with the chemistry of the drug. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense because it does. And it's not that it's any more stronger because pot can only get so strong. So 70% of the country is finally awoken and they want marijuana legalized. Now the DEA, Now, keep in mind, this drug was a Schedule 1 drug like heroin, above Oxycontin, above Vicodin, a Scheduled 1 fucking drug for the whole existence of it being illegal. So lately, they've moved it back to a Schedule 3, which is still like a Vicodin. People, oh, it's hilarious. It really is hilarious. I mean, the thing, look, yes, it may make you a little lazy. It may make you get the munchies, but that drug is about as harmful as going out and smoking a fucking rosebud or a banana pill. All right? That's about how harmful the drug is. You know, I mean, and what scares me is that I'm glad people have awakened, that 70% of the people get it, but there are still 30% of the population out there that are like not for it being legal. And I'm like, what in the fuck are you talking about? Maybe your garden should be illegal. How about we illegalize your tomatoes? How about we illegalize your corn that you're growing? I mean, give me a break. But yeah, that's just my thought on marijuana and the history of it. It's just really a laugh. It's really comical as hell. You know that more people die in one day from alcohol abuse, overdose, whatever, than anybody's died in the complete history of marijuana. And look, even Fox News, and they're the most conservative, you know, right-wing, hardcore against drug channel you could ever imagine. And even they admit it. Even they're like, you know, yeah, this shit is very mundane. Although there's still a few hosts on there that think that it's, you know, the devil's lettuce. And sometimes I will post shit. I like to fuck with people because I'm not even about the weed anymore. And I like to fuck with people to provoke them and say, oh no, it should be illegal. It's the devil's lettuce. It's going to fuck you up. And I only do that because I've been there, done that. And yeah, it's about as dangerous as smoking a banana pill. Seriously. Especially when it's legal. You know, and you can get it in a shop and you don't have to run into that guy at the dealer's house that's selling a bag of meth or wanting to sell you a 20 bag of coke or wanting to sell you some painkillers or some fentanyl, you know? So, people please. People please.